Hello and welcome. My name is Monica Kumar, and I've been in technology marketing for over 25 years. Currently, I am SVP of Marketing at Nutanix. Now, we're launching this brand new series. In this series, we'll be talking with tech leaders and share insights and experiences in innovation and leadership journeys. It would be an understatement to say that the world has changed, and the disruption has impacted all aspects of our lives. So, specifically, whether you call it business transformation, digital transformation, we are seeing massive changes that are pushing IT and business leadership skills like never before. In fact, I heard Satya Nadella from Microsoft recently observe that he has seen 3 years of digital transformation in the last 2 months. Now, think about this. Leading people and teams, even during normal times, is a job that requires grit and resilience. And add to that a crisis. And it's an even bigger disruption all around us. So, how is a leader going to cope with this environment? How will they inspire people? How will they lead people? So, in our first episode, we are going to focus on dynamic leadership in a crisis. So, with me today is Wang, Principal Analyst, Founder, and Chairman of Silicon Valley based Constellation Research. In addition to Ray's role as an advisor to many tech luminaries, he has also spent a lot of time on research and advising tech leaders on dynamic leadership during crisis. In fact, he has over 300,000 impressions around this work on Twitter alone. And by the way, Ray and I go way back from our time at Oracle when I first met him about a decade ago. So I'm really excited to have you on, Ray. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is crazy. We're living in the world's biggest shared reality experience. Almost every trend we know, it's been accelerated. And in some cases, we're operating on fear. In other cases, we're operating on momentum. And this is really very stressful for everybody. And the difference between companies and organizations that are going to succeed in this industry, it's not the technology. It's not necessarily the process. It's going to be the quality of leadership. And I think it's something that we're going to have to think about.
Absolutely, Ray. And I know you've written a paper on dynamic leadership, which describes what is required from a leader in getting through a crisis like this. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, we started this paper and it was at the beginning of 2017. There was a call to talk about responsive and responsible leadership. I think the World Economic Forum at that time was using that as their theme. And we started thinking about what was that impact with digital transformation. And this came from 10 years of talking to business leaders, companies around the world. These are Global 2000, anyone in the airline industry to industrial companies, to tech companies, to government organizations. And surprisingly, we learned that there are a couple ingredients that successful leaders have, and there are a couple attributes that they're really good at modulating between responsible and responsive. And it's something very important, especially in the middle of a crisis when there's no playbook.
Exactly. And in fact, I have read the paper and I love some of the traits that you mentioned in the paper, which sound simple, yet I think they're difficult to put in practice because of all the things the leader has to do. So I'd love for you to go through the list of the common traits that you think are important for leaders, especially in today's age of this pandemic and the crisis we're dealing with.
Monica, you're right. There are some core traits that don't change regardless of the fashion of leadership or whatever cool book that pops up on the bestseller list, right? These 5 traits that we're talking about here are inherent in every leader. The first one is integrity. The second one is thinking about inspiration. The third one is inclusiveness. The fourth one is authenticity. And the fifth one, it's being transparent. That transparency, even more important than ever.
We could do an episode on each of these traits, but I'm going to try to focus on a couple today. For me, it's really important that a leader inspires his or her team to do their best, to rise above and beyond, to lift others up. And it's all about inspiration. So I'd love for you to talk about that because especially today, if you look at how businesses are struggling to even stay open in some cases, workers are being furloughed, or in some cases, people are losing jobs. In other cases, and most cases, we are working from home. So how does a leader inspire in spite of all the things that are happening around us?
It's a great question. There are a lot of ways to actually inspire folks. It starts by understanding what the mission and purpose of an organization is and being able to translate that into something that is actionable for the individual. We are activating movements. We're getting people excited. We're helping people see their potential and understand why they're an important part of that mission. And that's up to every leader to personalize that, understand what motivates your team and how to get them excited about that. Now, there are a lot of things that are very hard to do. There's a lot of hard work to get there. And that's really also about leading and being able to show people how you do things yourself. And leading by example is very important as a way of looking at inspiration. But you know what? You're doing this right now. And my question to you is, what are you seeing as well? What is your advice to viewers here to actually help them get inspired?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. The way I look at it, Ray, is um, it was much easier to, what you just said, show by example when you were in the same physical space as people, because you're seeing them, you're meeting them. It's very hard to do it on Zoom, number one. And one of the things I've realized is that we often tend to become more transactional when we are in Zoom meetings, as opposed to focusing on being relational. So relating to people. So one thing I find is, like you said, connecting with people. I mean, ultimately, you inspire people. So you have to focus on the person. And what I've realized is that as a leader, the number one thing a leader needs to do is to make sure they care about people. And I think that's when inspiration will follow, because people will know that you care about them. So for me, one thing is, rather than just asking my team, like, hey, have you done these 5 things? Also checking in, making sure they know that we are in this together, that I also sometimes don't know the answers to the problems that may be happening. So that's one way. I think the second way is really, like you said, by action, helping prioritize, helping cut out stuff that's not important. People tend to make everything urgent, but they may not be important. So one of the things I've realized is, if I can help my team prioritize, if I can help them focus on the impact that they can deliver, that by itself becomes inspirational to them, because they can see me helping them get to more impact based outcomes, as opposed to just driving outputs day in and day out and getting kind of really exhausted with a long laundry list of things they have to do. So
It
I
sounds
mean,
like
that's
you're actually practicing a piece that's really important. It's a level of empathy as well as you think about your leadership aspect. And I think that's
yeah, yeah.
very, very powerful in terms of inspiring people, because they have to know that you care for them. They have to know that you're thinking from their perspective. And I think that's also important. We'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about what we modulate in sort of some of the other attributes.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. It's always a work in progress, of course. So now let's turn to the one of the other traits you talked about, which is inclusiveness. That's a topic that's very much near and dear to my heart. So how should leaders walk the walk, as they say, when it comes to inclusiveness?
Inclusiveness comes in so many different ways. And one of the options that we always think about is really about diversity and diversity of thought. And what we are looking for is trying to include as many different conversations, viewpoints as that design point. The other piece that's important is also thinking about people's styles. Some people are very extrovert oriented and they always have a lot to say, but it's also finding techniques to actually get input and suggestions for those that are much more shy or much more introverted. And I think it's important to think about this. And this is really about your awareness of what's going around, the team dynamics, the culture, the way people communicate. It's different in every region. It's different in every company. It's different in every group. And that understanding of that actually helps to drive some of that inclusiveness. And, it's also important, right, today to be able to understand people's perspectives from not just the diversity of thought, but also the experiences that they bring within their lives. And people are coming from different places and different backgrounds. Now, Monica, I know this is an area you've been very actively engaged. I see that on Twitter. I see some of the activities you do in general across the industry. So talk about some of that. What are you doing to pull team members and people in your community to participate in this inclusion?
Absolutely. No, thank you for saying that. One of the things I've realized, Ray, over the years, in really building teams and empowering people, is the biggest thing you can do for them. If somebody feels empowered to bring ideas forward, that they are listened, that they are heard, that they belong, I don't think you can do anything more than that to really put the wind beneath somebody's wings, so as to say. So by inclusion, when I think of inclusion, by the way, and it's diversity is one thing. Of course, we want to get diversity of ideas and perspectives, but inclusion is when you actually listen to those ideas and perspectives, when you take those into account in decision making. And to me, that's very important. It's not just good to have, it's a must have. And there are lots and lots of studies out there and research that's proven it's actually great for business outcomes from a profitability perspective, from customer experience perspective, from employee retention perspective, and overall, doing our part to build an equal and just community perspective. So for me, I guess a couple things that I do is, make sure we go around if we're in a meeting, go around and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And make sure everybody has a chance to voice their opinion about a certain topic so that they are heard. And also, number two, we do work, in our company to train people to understand that people come from different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, that, like you said, they may not want to speak up in a public setting. So how do you empower them to do so? Can they send written communication? I think on Zoom, actually, it's become easier in some ways. You can put your comments in the chat window and they can get read, and so they are heard that way. So I think the thing that you hit on the head is you have to engage people. And for me, it's all about empowering people for them to feel like they are being heard, listened, and that they have their voices is being taken into account in decision making. So let's move to another one. Authenticity. Oh, I love this one too. I actually love this quote from Diana Ross. I can be a better me than anyone else can, right? So if you think about that, how does authentic leadership enable leaders to help in transformation efforts? More specifically today, having to balance negative news, negative effects of COVID, how do leaders do that and stay authentic?
It's a good point. Authenticity really comes from within. If you are acting in a way that's not yourself, it's probably going to be pretty obvious that you're faking it, right? And so I think a lot of it is really understanding what your strengths are, playing on the strengths, relying on your teams for those weaknesses and areas to augment what you're doing and bringing that together. A lot of part of authenticity is also making sure that, you are honest, right? You're honest about what you're thinking or what you're saying, where you can be. In some cases, you can't talk about certain things. People understand that. But that authenticity really, I guess the easiest way to say is like authenticity is like, how would you act and behave if nobody was around, right? And what would that be like? And how would you actually be perceived? And that's who you are to start with. And you start with that core, and then from there you build on that. So for example, if you're someone that, really, really enjoys talking to people, it comes across, right? And it's okay. You can be very gregarious. You can be out there. You can, greet people. If you're very shy and you're trying to be gregarious, it's pretty awkward, right? So don't try that. It's okay. People will know that maybe you're shy. You're much more, pensive and considerate. That's okay. That's who you are. Don't try to change that, but you can be a little bit more outgoing, but don't overdo it to the point where it feels fake and it doesn't make sense. So I think that's really important.
I absolutely agree with you, Ray. And I can tell you just, from my example, as a person of color, a woman, and I can go into many, many different, aspects of how I am different. I realized very early on that if I try to emulate somebody else as a leader profile, I'm going to fail miserably because, like you said, how long can I fake it, in terms of who I am?
And you're right. And you're right. It's about finding your own style, right? Finding
Yeah.
something you're comfortable with that is effective, and it takes time. I mean, you you have to, it takes time to actually fine tune that, but it's not impossible. And please don't be someone else, right? Please don't be someone else. Be yourself. And I think it will show. And that really helps to augment that feeling of trust as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have some great stories about leadership styles and authenticity. And I love Bollywood movies, of course. And I actually wrote a LinkedIn article, I think it was a couple years ago, about how Bollywood movies have influenced my leadership style. And I'm going to stay true to myself. Bollywood movies are very emotional. You have highs, you have lows, but at the end of the day, you get through everything and everybody lives happily ever after. Well, that's the traditional Bollywood movie plot line. And that's what I bring to my leadership style. That's my authentic self. Like, hey, there's going to be emotional drama. We'll deal through crisis. We'll have good times together. And let's be okay to bring our emotions out to work. That's okay with me. Anyway,
They are
let's move
definitely happier endings than Korean dramas. I'll leave it at that. I'm not Korean, but those Korean dramas go the other way pretty fast. So,
on. All right, let's talk about transparency. I think this is, as Dalai Lama says, right? A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. So, how do leaders walk this fine balance today where you want to be transparent, but obviously you can't share every single thing about the business with your teams at times because of certain compliance and regulations as well? So, I'd love your perspective on transparency.
is a great point, right? You can't share everything, but people need to know what they can expect from you. And I think part of it is that expectation, right? We're having a great quarter. Yeah, but all the numbers are down. Okay, well, how do you get there, right? You can't do that, right? So the transparency piece is really letting people know what information at what point in time that they can be able to know that they're going to receive from you. It's about understanding when you can answer a question, when you can say, I can't answer this at this moment, but I will get back to you when we actually can tell you what the answer. Those are all very important because being able to share that information and being able to give everybody that same information to look at helps them get to that direction, helps them figure out how they can be part of the solution and be able to be empowered, to your earlier point. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's transparency, something very hard to get to, right? Given where we are. So, and I think it's one of those things where we've got to think about how do we actually build those tools and bring that information so that people can actually democratize decisions, help them get to the right set of information, help them figure out when that information doesn't make sense, especially given how much information out there that isn't always accurate and isn't always timely. And so building that kind of competency inside an organization is important for leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. As I think about this, as you're talking about this, I think communication and transparency go hand in hand, right? And I do think that today, specifically in this age of crisis and people working from home, I think we have to over communicate in a sense, because otherwise people will feel in a silo. They don't know what's going on. And one of the things I'm seeing companies do, and our company is doing it, we have more town halls at the company level, but even at team levels, we have check-ins. For example, I do a weekly stay connected call with my team. Just again, for the sake of transparency, to share anything, they can ask questions. I'll respond to them to the best of my capability. And sometimes they say, I don't know what the answer is. Let's figure this out together. Let's do this. I know that you have another framework that we were talking about earlier. So I'd love for you to sum up like your advice to leaders as they navigate, through uncertain times, and as they're leading teams. You have this framework that we were talking about, the responsible and responsive. I'd love for you to share that with our viewers.
It's a good point, right? Those 5 immutable traits, super important. Every leader has to start there. Now, the secret between good leadership and great leadership is the ability to modulate between responsible and responsive. And there are about 7 areas that are important. Now, and why is this important? Look, there's no COVID-19 pandemic playbook, right? In fact, if one was to be written, it's being written in the moment. And it really requires a leader to learn to modulate along these 7 attributes that bounce between responsive and responsible. So let me give you an example, right? And here's one that's important. Performance expectations, right? A responsible leader, super accountable, right? Did you do it? Is it here? What time is it, right? When do you expect this? Well, that's important. But in these times, we actually have to be more responsive because you're working from home. There's a lot of distractions. You're not very comfortable in the environment you're in. Sometimes you don't even have an environment that's dedicated for you to work. And so we need to be more empathetic about performance expectations. So modulating between accountable and empathetic is important because that gives you the ability to have that wide range that's needed to balance these foundational attributes. Here's another one, right? We look about leaders, we're like, that's wonderful. They were decisive. They made quick decisions. It was amazing. Okay, sometimes you need that. But other times, we hope our leaders are thoughtful and they're pensive and they've really thought through all the issues. Now, in a crisis, if you're super pensive, I'm going to be a little bit worried because like we need something now, right? And you took like 10 days to figure this out when we needed, and we only had 10 hours. And so you see that modulation again. Here we want someone to be responsible and be super decisive as opposed to being pensive. Now, if you've got the time, it's a super strategic decision. You're going to do something pensive. Same thing with demeanor, but demeanor is a little bit different, right? That's actually a style thing, and it really depends on the organization. In some places, you want the leader to be super composed, super polished, right? In other places, you want them to be excited. You want to feel the passion. You want them to, inspire you with that passion. And you can see how those differ. And that's really important. So there's other pieces around these attributes you could take a look, but it's really around decision making, demeanor, goals and objectives, policy and actions, your motivational approach, what you do for performance expectations, and then of course, execution style. And that really balances it out.
Wow, that's a fantastic framework, Ray. I think the responsible versus responsive and balancing those two for a leader is very important. Now, I think we're coming to an end. I did want to ask you a couple of quick questions. What's one leadership trait that you're working to hone in on?
For me, it's really about trying to figure out the execution style. And the reason that execution style is important is because, we're a smaller firm. And so we have to decide when we're super focused, here's what's on plan, or when do we take out and do something that's opportunistic. And I'll give you a great example. We've been doing a show for some time called Disrupt TV, and that's been 4 years out. And for us, it's just something that's been a great way to bring knowledge and information inside our organization and within our network to everybody else out there. Basically, what's been going on in the post-pandemic era and the pandemic, we have to figure out, do we do more of these types of videos? Do we do more of types of these shows? And maybe we actually take advertising for once. It's something we haven't normally done. We've just used it to actually it's just fun, right? We get together on a Friday, right? But if we do that, would we do more video shows, right? And that's not within our focus. Our focus hasn't always been that. But given where we are today, that might be something opportunistic. And so it's about getting good with staying within your goals, staying with what you're supposed to do in the plan, and then saying, hey, wait, there's some huge opportunity out here. We're getting 80, 100,000 views on some of these shows. Maybe we should monetize that, right? And so that's where I'm honing in right now. What about you? What's something that you're working on?
Yes, I'm working on many things, believe me. But if I were to pick one, I would say it's less perfection and more authenticity. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. I mean, I think I say that a lot, that, hey, it's okay not to be perfect. But then I realize sometimes I push myself to the limit to get things to be perfect. Like, for example, when I was setting up to find a space for this video podcast, I was driving myself and my daughter crazy to find the perfect spot. And she said, Mom, what happened to less perfection, more authenticity? And I said, oh my God, Maya, you're so right. So we settled in her room. I'm in Maya's room in front of her desk, which is beautiful because she actually put the wallpaper and everything on her desk. So yeah, less perfection, more authenticity is what I'm working on. Ways to go. Let me ask you another one.
Hard.
It's hard. Yeah. Well, name one leader that you admire, who you think is doing a fabulous job of navigating the crisis, which has either one of the traits that you mentioned.
I'm going to pick on Elon Musk, and only because he's out there, but he's also doing some great stuff at the same time. And one of the things about Elon Musk is that, he seems to be massively decisive, right? He knows where he's going. He knows what's going to happen. And I think, for him during this crisis, he's been very, very good with his decision making. I think on the demeanor side, you can definitely tell he's passionate. Like, open the plants, get things going, right? What are people waiting for, right? So you can see that he's trying to get everyone fired up, excited about what's going on. And then in terms of goals and objectives, I think for him, it's really about the collective goals. I mean, he's really trying to transform the energy market, the autonomous vehicle market, what's happening with the future of auto and insurance, right? And all those benefits are really there's societal benefits that he's going after. The Boring Company, SpaceX, right? All these things are like big ideas finally coming into action. And then in terms of policy and actions, though, I think he's less principled and more adaptive. I think what he's trying to do is because the things he's doing, they're high growth, they're super innovative. He's got to balance and navigate between the both. And then the motivational approach, he is definitely demanding. I know a lot of people that work for him, and the goals are super lofty and high. I mean, he's slightly compassionate, but he's like, let's go, let's get this done. I mean, when they were having problems with Tesla in terms of manufacturing quality at the auto plant in Fremont, he pulled up a sleeping bag and slept there. So you knew he was serious about what was going on. And then, of course, performance expectations. You're highly accountable over at Tesla.
Yeah.
You can't really mess up. And the point being, it's not about empathetic for him. It's we got to go. We've got to get there. And every time you watch that SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket come back to Earth, actually come back and land on a pad, you're like, okay, that is amount of perfection and precision that everybody on that team was completely accountable. And that takes us back to execution style. I think he's completely focused on where he wants to go. The plans have been out there for quite some time. He's less opportunistic. He's definitely focused. And that's very interesting. So it's one of these folks that, you can see that it'll be different for different types of leaders, but it's working for Tesla.
Well, I can certainly see that you're a big fan of his, and he's doing amazing things. And I think in that case, obviously, it's not less perfection. We need to be perfect when you're talking science and we are doing space flights. Absolutely. For me, I was thinking there's such amazing examples out there. It's hard to pick one. But if I were to pick one, I would pick Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand and the way she's running her country. And I mean, it's incredible to me. And obviously, also a big fan of women leaders as well, and I just look at her as decisive. She's composed under crisis. I mean, what she's done to navigate the coronavirus crisis in a company. She's a young mother. She is empathetic, compassionate. She obviously cares about people. Every time I see her, I watch her on TV. I see her compassion for people is driving her decision making. If for her, it's all about protecting her people and making sure they have the best life possible. So I look up to her. I mean, I know a lot of people that I talk to look up to leadership like hers as well, which is a blend of decisiveness. It's a blend of taking action, being principled, being demanding and accountable at times, yet having the compassionate and empathetic side to her. So anyway, I know we can go on. We have lots of other examples. I think we should wrap up. This was fantastic, Ray. I'm really glad we got to talk about this topic. And like I said, we could go on and on. But I really want to thank you for your insights. We've only scratched the surface in terms of the surface, of dynamic leadership traits. We'll be able to do more of this as we do more episodes, right, around different topics, around culture, around what's driving IT and business leaders for innovation. But with that, let's wrap up today's video podcast. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining us. And thank you to the viewers for listening.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. This is wonderful.
All right. Take care, everyone.